So what's up everyone? So for this week I want to go over a couple of photos that I took in Seoul. I just recently traveled to Seoul for a week and a half or so, and I took a bunch of photos, and these are a couple of photos that I really liked that I took in Seoul, and I kind of want to talk about the settings as well as the way that I took them, what went through my head, and just the entire backstory about these photos. Basically similar to how I do the videos about my photos in LA, but this time me being in Seoul because I photographed in Seoul. Yeah, before I start getting off and rambling about other things, let's get started. Starting with this first picture, I took this at the Namsan Tower. You can visit there by hiking up, this kind of hill. It's a pretty long hike, maybe 20 or 30 minutes or so. Not too long, I guess, compared to any other hikes that you might have been on, but it is pretty strenuous to get there. So just be sure to kind of prepare for that in case you aren't used to hikes. For me, I've hiked it before, so it wasn't too much or too difficult for me. But again, people differ about that, so just be warned in case you do want to check this out. But yeah, starting with this location, this was again the Namsan Tower, and the settings for it, I took it with my 24-70 GM2 f2.8, and you'll kind of see that that's the lens that I took most of my images on, especially when I use my A7R5. This is the lens that I basically carried around with me 99% of the time. And if you are looking for a travel lens that is really good and really reliable and has really good quality, as well as something that you want for low light, I would highly recommend this lens. This lens is such a reliable tool that you can use to capture basically 99% of the images that you want because of the versatility of the 24-70 focal length, as well as it being a GM lens, so it's super reliable and the image quality is going to be fantastic. But anyways, the settings for the camera was ISO 125. I took it at 30 millimeters, and I took it at f4.5, and then the shutter speed was 1/400th of a second. So for this image, first of all, I just want to say it was a beautiful sunset, and this is the image that I came out with. It was a beautiful sunset. There were a bunch of beautiful clouds. There were tons and tons of photos from the shoot that I loved, but this one really stood out to me. With this image, really what I wanted to do was obviously showcase the cityscape because Seoul has such a beautiful cityscape, and if you've never seen it before, I would highly recommend that you do. And if you are visiting the city soon, there are tons of hiking places and tons of places just in general that you can see the cityscape from, which I'll be making another video about, talking about my favorite places that I would recommend for people who've never been to Seoul, or if you have been to Seoul before, places that you might not have known. Again, that will be in another video that I'll make later. But yeah, anyways, back to this picture. It was a beautiful sunset, and one of my main things that I really wanted to do was make sure I checked my corners. And that was very important to me. I was really focusing more on the bottom left and bottom right. So with the bottom right, I really wanted to make sure that you couldn't see anyone, or anyone's head or arm was in the frame, because that would just be kind of weird. So I had this kind of telescope thing right here on the bottom right, and I'm fine with cutting a little bit of that part out. That's not too much of an issue with me. And then the left part as well, I didn't want to make sure there were any like random head or random arm, again, like basically the same as the bottom right. I just wanted to make sure the bottom right and the bottom left corners were looking good and making sure there wasn't anything random coming in the frame. And then the second part with this image I want to make sure is to make sure that the people in the foreground were kind of bokeh a bit, which is why I shot this at f4.5. With this particular scene, it was very difficult for me to get an actual cityscape by itself because there were so many people. So in the middle of the shoot, I was kind of like, let me just embrace what the scene is. There are a bunch of people fighting for, a picture of the cityscape. I'm not gonna get in front, so why not just make them a part of the scene? Then why not just make them a part of the pictures I'm taking? And that's kind of what I did roughly around the middle of the shoot when I first got up to the Namsan Tower. And I'm so glad I did. I'm really happy with the images that I got from the shoot when I started including people in my frame instead of fighting them for the cityscape shot, which honestly I don't like as much as these images that have people, for me at least. I really like these images from this day that I took when there were people in the frame, and I took them witnessing this view. For me, I don't know, it just adds a bit more character to the image and also adds a bit more depth in terms of storytelling, and also depth in the images as well, because there's foreground in it. And that's what I really like to do with my images. Add foreground, background, and then there's the midground. And that kind of gives it depth story-wise and depth image-wise. And that's what I really liked. That's it with this image. Let's go on to the next image. So with the next image, I took at I'm probably gonna butcher this name, so please forgive me if you do know the name of this and how to say it in Korean and such like that. The location that the image was taken at was Namhan Sansong. I'm sorry if I butchered that name, but this was one of my favorite hiking places that I hiked during my time in Seoul. And for this trip in Seoul, I really made it a kind of a priority to go to all these hiking places just to get these cityscapes of Seoul. For this photo, I took it with my A7R5, and I took it with my 24-70 again. 24-70 GM2 f2.8. So for this shoot, I actually brought my 24-70 GM2 and my 85mm Zeiss Batis 1.8. So the reason why I took both of those is I don't have a quote-unquote traditional telephoto lens in terms of, you know, a 70 to 200 or, you know, 100 or 400 or something, you know, very long like that. So the way that I use my lenses is because I have this A7R5 and I have the 24-70 and I have the 85. My way of kind of cheating into getting a telephoto lens or a kind of a semi-long telephoto lens is to use the APS-C crop mode on the A7R5. And with the 85mm lens, if I use the APS-C crop mode, I get roughly around, if my math is correct, 130mm or so like that. So I do get pretty, you know, far out. And then with my 24-70, I get 105mm, approximately around there. So that allows me to, you know, bring less, but still have that kind of versatility, which I do enjoy. Sometimes I do end up coming short, which is, you know, that's the times where I'm like, man, I wish I really had a 70 to 200. But, you know, you can't really have everything, right? So I have to sacrifice having that in terms with saving space in my bag and, you know, not having to carry so much weight on my back when I'm hiking. But yeah, that's with that. So this particular picture I took with 24-70 GM2. With this photo, I took with that lens and that camera. And with the camera settings, I took it at ISO 640, 35mm, f11, and 1/160th of a second. So there are three main things that I really wanted to do with this image. The first thing was to get the Lotte World Tower, this huge tower right here, right smack in the middle. I had to really position my tripod and my camera to the point where I had that tower right in the center of the dot of my, you know, my screen. So that way I can tell that's right smack in the middle. The second thing was to make sure that these trees right here were in the foreground, which, you know, I just had to include it. And the third thing, I wanted to position the sky to where it didn't dominate the, you know, the majority of the frame. I really wanted to make sure that the sky took 1/3 of, you know, if you look at the rule of thirds grid, I want to make sure the sky took 1/3 of the frame or less than that. Because the sky didn't have anything in particular that was very interesting. It was a cloudless night and it was just basically pure nothing. So really the sky had no interest whatsoever, so why even include most of it in the frame, right? So that wasn't too important to me. So I really wanted everything else that was interesting, like the cityscape or the trees in the foreground, to really dominate the frame. So that's why the light or the sky didn't really take much room. So I really wanted to make sure that those three things happened, and then, you know, the location basically took care of the rest as well as the light. The light thankfully came at like a 30-degree angle from the back and the side, which gives the image so much depth. And I really just like the look of images that have this type of depth. Just because the lighting and the way that the sun is positioned, it just gives it that richness and that feel. I just love this image so much because of that. So yeah, that was it for the photos from Seoul. There are a bunch of other photos from Seoul that I really enjoyed. For this trip, I'm trying not to really edit as much unless I have free time because I'm only here for a certain amount of time. I can always edit these when I get back home to LA. So I don't really want to waste any time that I have, you know, traveling because, you know, I don't know when I'll be back. So yeah, I don't know if I'll be back with another video next week. So yeah, whenever the next video is, yeah, look forward to it. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you maybe next week or 2 weeks or something like that. But yeah, later.